So the Plague Marines are going to be 21 points, and Blight Lord Terminators only 40. Games Workshop has given us a complete rundown of the points in their new Codex, so let's go through what changes are in store for the Death Guard. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking through each and every points change in the Death Guard Codex, the one that's due to be released very shortly from Games Workshop. It's quite fun that they've managed to give us all of the points costs early. It means that analysing each unit should be a bit easier when the actual Codex comes out. I would bear in mind though that with these points costs, we do know that pretty much every datasheet is changing in some way or another. We've seen several buffs to things in some leaked datasheets coming out of packaging, and Warhammer community have shown off several other cool things. We will have to wait for the Codex for the full picture, but in the meantime I think it's still worth talking through these. They do highlight some interesting things, and particularly highlight some units that I think are going to see a lot of play when the Codex does drop. So let's start out with the Lords of the Death Guard then, with the HQ section. Chaos Lords have gone up a little bit, they're now 85 points from 80. I do wonder if they might take the opportunity to give them Toughness 5 or Disgustingly Resilient. It would make them fit in a bit more with the rest of the theme of the army. They feel a bit out of place at the moment to me. Perhaps the biggest winner out of the HQ section is the Death Guard Demon Prince. He has dropped to 140 points from 160, and he's typically one of the best characters to put warlord traits and relics on, just because you get so much more out of them on a monster than on some standard HQ choice. 175 points with wings, I'd be very surprised if he's still not one of the go-to choices to lead the Codex. The Lord of Contagion has gone up a little to 120 points, and the all-new Lord of Virulence that you can see here on the right, he is now confirmed at 120 points. We know he's armed with a twin Plague Spitter and some sort of plague-related power fist, but we don't know what sort of buffs he's going to give these demon engines yet. Most certainly one to watch. The Plague Casters down to 95 points from 100, and Death Guard Sorcerers, Terminator Lords and Typhus are either very similar or unchanged. Moving on to the troops choices, it seems to be really quite good news. I was estimating 21 or 22 points for Plague Marines. It seems that they are 21, and it makes them a very efficient little core of the Codex. 2 wounds with -1 to damage means that damage 2 weapons won't really affect them too much, and with extra melee power with AP -1 plague knives and extra attacks, they're looking pretty solid. We'll have to see just how effective the various character buffs can be for them. If they can still be stacked with a whole load of stratagems and buffs just like in the last Codex, then things could be very good for them. Interestingly, both Cultists and Poxwalkers appear to have gone down. They're both 5 points per model. The Cultists are 5 points from 6 compared with their other Chaos brethren, and the Poxwalkers are 5 points from 7. I suspect the Poxwalker change is partly due to the fact that they're not going to be getting Disgustingly Resilient anymore. -1 damage has no effect on 1 wound models. It remains to be seen if they'll have any other new abilities though on their datasheet. Even with losing old Disgustingly Resilient, it might still have slightly improved them as a unit potentially. They're not quite as tough point for point, but they will have gained more damage output point for point, so might be able to kill a few more light infantry if they do get engaged. Moving on to the fast attack, Spawn are unchanged at 23 points, but there's been a substantial decrease to the Bloat Drone and a substantial increase to the Mephitic Blight Hauler. A Bloat Drone with 2 Plague Spitters will now only cost you 130 points, which is down all the way from 155, though I believe that they did lose a wound of durability and their melee damage isn't quite as good based on their leaked datasheets. Still though, with such a drastic points cut, I still think that they're coming out ahead. If you want a Flesh Mower, then that'll cost you an extra 5 points, and if you want a Heavy Blight Launcher, then that's an extra 10 for 140. The Flesh Mower variant in particular could be interesting, particularly now it's hitting on 3s. I'm afraid the Blight Hauler on the other hand has taken a very drastic increase. Because of all the buffs it got, I was expecting it to go up a bit, but maybe not quite this much. Blight Hauler is now 140 points, all the way up from 100, and now rather than a very cheap threatening battle line unit, they're now looking a lot more niche in application. We do know that they've gained an extra wound and ballistic skill 3+, and that extra shot with the multi-melter, so they're still going to be pretty decent little anti-tank platforms, and fairly durable. But 140 points really is a lot, particularly when Plague Burst Crawlers aren't all that much more than that, and they are just so much tougher. I think it's really quite a shame for them. They were shaping up to be one of the better units in the Codex if they weren't hit quite this hard. More positive news on the Elite section though. As best I can tell, Blight Lord Terminators might just be one of the biggest winners of the entire dex. We already know that they've gained an additional wound. Their Bale Swords have got a little bit stronger due to the extra strength on power weapons, and despite those 2 excellent buffs, they've also gone down in points, dropping to 40 points from 43. You could have a unit of 5 of these for 200 points, that's putting 15 wounds at toughness 5 and 2+ save on the table, then -1 damage if you do try and hit them with heavy weapons, and they're just going to be an absolute nightmare to remove. The Death Shroud went up a bit rather than going down, going up to 50 points from 47, which for me is kind of fair enough for the extra wound that they're getting, and we also know that they're going to be hitting on 2s as well, so they'll be even more deadly than before with those scythes. From what we know so far, it does seem that the 2 are fairly balanced, they're both very tough, but the Death Shroud just pay a premium for being thoroughly lethal in melee as well. In terms of unit upgrades, apparently the Death Shroud can take something called Chimes of Contagion for 15 points extra. I'm not entirely sure what this is. Possibly some new extra rules for a fancy bit that's modelled on the kit, perhaps. I think the Terminators might well shake out to be one of the biggest winners of the decks. A big unit with a psychic buff or 2 to make them even tougher could be pretty much immovable in the centre of the table. Moving on, Possessed appear to have gone up to 24 points from 20, which to be honest seems fair enough for reflecting exactly how many buffs they're going to be getting. We know that they'll be Toughness 5, they have 4 attacks each with those horrifying mutations, and they'll also be re-rolling wound rolls of 1, as horrifying mutations are plague weapons now. I'd say point for point they're pretty much equally durable, but far more dangerous in melee. Otherwise, to round off the elite section, Hellbrute loadouts look quite similar on the whole. The Talisman and the Plague Surgeon are plus 10 points on before. I'm still interested to see whether or not that Plague Surgeon will give you a Feel No Pain type save to make up for losing the old disgusting resilience. And the Noxious Blightbringer and the Foul Blight Spawn are both unchanged. Finally, for points changes, we get onto the heavy support. Land Raiders are unchanged, Predators are kind of similar, though I think the Predator Destructor has weirdly gone up in points for some reason. Not that many people were taking those two anyway compared with other options. Plague Burst Crawlers seem to be slight winners of the update, they're going down to 165 points, and we know they're getting Ballistic Skill 3+, so should be a bit more dangerous as a result. Previously, the Plague Spitters used to be the more expensive option. They were 5 points more than the Entropy Cannons, but that's now being flipped round. Entropy Cannons are now 5 points more expensive than Plague Spitters, meaning that one with Entropy Cannons is now 175 points. I believe that the damage output of the Entropy Cannons have been changed to D3+3, so they really are excellent tank hunters now. The Defiler is now 165 points base. For most loadouts, I think that's a slight bump in points, but again, now its weapon skill and ballistic skill 3+, it's going to be a lot more accurate with its weapons. Chaos Rhinos have gone up a tiny amount to 80 points. Mortarion remains 490 points, no bad thing at all seeing as he gains toughness 8 out of this update. And the new Plague Fortification, the Miasmic Malignifier, that's now confirmed to be 75 points, and still be interesting to see whether or not it's taken. From the previous updates, we know it's going to give cover to nearby Death Guard units. It can set up somewhere in the midfield so you can move your troops into cover rather than having to loiter in your deployment zone. And it's got a 9-inch range for those Contagions of Nurgle, giving any enemy units that venture too close a -1 to their toughness. Honestly, if you're playing against it, it does sound quite annoying, but it's going to be hard to weigh that up against more Death Guard units, things that can actually move around, shoot and deal damage. Last but not least, we have a points cost table for the deadly pathogens. We don't know what most of these do yet, but we know that there's 7 to choose from, as is very fitting. We'll have to wait for their actual rules to see whether they're any good or not. Viscous Death is the only one that we know so far, and this allows you to re-roll the number of shots on a random shot weapon. For just 10 points, that seems like it could be a decent pickup on a Foul Blight spawn. That Plague Sprayer can really be pretty brutal. So, plenty of interesting points changes to chew over there. I'll most certainly be looking forward to putting these into context when we actually have the Death Guard Codex, and I'll do a full review when that's out. Until then though, it really looks like Plague Marines and Terminators are shaping up to be some of the biggest winners. It's hard to see how they couldn't be very solid units based on the stats and points that they have. If you've enjoyed the video and you'd like to see some more Death Guard content on the channel, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. And if you have been enjoying quite a lot of my videos recently, I would just like to mention that the channel has a Patreon page, which you can find down in the video description. Making all of this content does take a fair amount of time, and if you are enjoying regularly, then any support is massively appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, such as seeing certain new videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the channel's monthly prize giveaways, with a chance to win some big model kits, including some copies of No Fear with some Death Guard in this month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support the channel, then the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.